Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. It is your local community radio station, and my name is Andy, and I will be with you for the next hour. We are broadcasting on Yagara and Turrbal country. And of course, a lot of the news in the last week has been about Palestine, and over the last couple of years, a lot of the news and a lot of our Paradigm Shift episodes here have been about Palestine, what's happened there. And of course, there has been a ceasefire there, which is amazing news, but there's still a lot of work to do if we want real peace and real justice in that place. And not long before the news was dominated with that ceasefire arrangement, there was for a little while a lot of coverage of the Sumud Flotilla of boats, over 100 boats trying to get to Gaza to deliver humanitarian supplies, and there were a few Australians on those boats. And today we will hear from one of them, Juliet Lamont, about her experiences both being part of that flotilla, which was a pretty amazing experience in itself, that moment of global solidarity, but then of course the unfortunate end where she was detained by the Israel occupation forces and eventually deported back to Australia, where she's currently. So in the second half of the show, we will hear from Juliet about that experience. And in the first half, we will be speaking to Remah Naji from Justice for Palestine Magunjin, a regular friend of the show here on the Paradigm Shift, just about the ceasefire, what it means for people in Palestine, and what it means for the solidarity movement here in Australia and around the world, which of course has been so active over the last couple of years, and which I guess the job's not done. And so we'll speak to Remah about that.
My name is Remah Naji. I'm one of the lead organisers with Justice for Palestine Magunjin.
And it's been a big couple of weeks for news in Palestine, of course, as everybody would have heard. The Hamas and the Israeli government have agreed to a ceasefire for now. So I guess to start off with, in your opinion, is the ceasefire good news?
Of course the ceasefire is a good news. The bombs needed to stop and the aid needed to enter to Palestinians in Gaza. But this is a legal obligation. This should never be used as a bargaining chip. What we're seeing in Palestine right now, specifically in Gaza, is that anytime Palestinians are to critique that so-called peace plan presented by Trump with input from Netanyahu, we are being asked a question about whether or not we are happy a ceasefire now exists. And it's almost pushing us into a framework where we are either killed or being forced into subjugation, whereas the framework that should exist for anyone who cares for human rights is one where Palestinians are neither killed nor subjugated. We are entitled to life, we are entitled to the full application of international law, and we are entitled to human rights just like every other nation across the globe.
Yeah, I guess, are there elements of the ceasefire that you think are particularly not being highlighted by Western media, things that people should be noticing about the plan and should be talking about?
I think one of the most important things about this peace plan is that there is no accountability at all, as if the hundreds of thousands of lives who were killed by the Israeli occupation forces worth nothing, as if the destruction of 95% of infrastructure in Gaza is nothing, as if the targeting and bombing of hospitals, places of worship, schools, universities, it is meant nothing for the world. And I think the question that everyone should be grappling with at this stage is, if there is no accountability and justice was not served in the most horrific crime of our time, then how do we guarantee that this genocide is not going to happen again to Palestinians or other people?
Yeah. Are you hearing from people in Palestine, in Gaza? What's the feeling on the ground about the last week?
Look, Palestinians are now, they're having a break. And when we say a break, that means that they are able to access clean water and a meal without having to risk their lives. Maybe they're able to sleep through the night without the sound of drones and bombs. Maybe they're not fleeing from one so-called safe zone to another because there was no safe zone during the relentless bombardment of the Gaza Strip. So at this stage, they are assessing the damage that this genocide has caused. And some Palestinians are pulling out their loved ones from under the rubble in order to, offer them a dignified burial. So this is the time where Palestinians are able to understand the amount of damage that this genocide has caused, and also it is a chance for them to mourn their loved ones, to grieve. It is a time for them to start rebuilding their lives, because as much as Western media is trying to paint this as Palestinians are going back to their homes, there are no more homes left for Palestinians. There is nothing there. It's completely and utterly unlivable right now. So if we're looking at what Palestinians are doing right now, yes, they are relieved that at the very, very least, the bombs have stopped. But at the same time, it's hard for us who are used to safety and used to stability to understand or imagine what it's like for them now to go back to nothing, the nothingness of their lives. It is something that some psychologists, some Palestinian psychologists have been saying, that to understand the impact of this genocide on Palestinians, it's going to take us years and years to understand how this is going to manifest in the lives of those genocide survivors, because this is something we've never seen in the history of mankind. We've never seen anything like this. People who are documenting their own suffering to the world, while the world doesn't give a damn. When I say the world, I mean specifically governments that keep saying we care about peace in the Middle East, we care about human rights, and at the same time they're the same ones funding and manufacturing the weapons components that are used in this genocide. So it is something that we are still not grappling with. It's something that is very hard for us to understand how this is going to manifest in the lives of Palestinians, whether in Gaza or outside of Gaza.
Now, for the movement or for Palestinian justice around the world, of which, of course, you're a big part, over the last couple of years, there's been so many rallies where the demands have been for a ceasefire, and I guess now we have that. I wonder how do you think that the movement for Palestinian justice should reflect on this moment and what the last couple of years of that kind of solidarity has meant and has achieved?
Look, we built a significant power on the ground, and whilst we were calling for a ceasefire, we are also calling for the full liberation of Palestinians. We're calling for the occupation to end. We are calling for the apartheid wall to be dismantled. We are calling for the right of return of Palestinian refugees to their land and the land of their ancestors. And over the past 2 years, what we have been doing alongside our demands for a ceasefire is educating people about the plight of Palestinians. And for the first time, we were able to communicate to people because of the gravity of the situation, because it was evidence and proof that colonization wasn't going to resolve itself. And colonization manifests in the most brutal ways. And this is what we saw, the genocide.
It is interesting, I guess, the media rhetoric around it, Trump and Netanyahu making this ceasefire, and there's no credit given to the movement around the world or to Palestinian people, even for being, steadfast in their own land. And it's interesting to watch, I guess, the media coverage of it, isn't it?
It's certainly interesting watching the media coverage and also not paying attention to the Palestinian hostages who are being freed from Israeli prisons and using the language of prisoners when they are civilians abducted from their families. Some of them are children, and a lot of them have been abducted and thrown in Israeli prisons with no charges, zero charges, and they get out of those prisons. They're tortured, there are signs of torture, and I haven't seen the outrage in the Western media. I have not seen that outrage. We're talking about thousands of Palestinian hostages. And we need to call them hostages because, again, these are civilians who have been abducted with no charges, no crimes, and they leave those prisons with clear signs of torture. And this is something missing from the narrative of the Western media. We need to see that accountability. We need to see that aspect of Palestinian lives given the spotlight that it deserves. Palestinians have given the world sacrifices that no one should make. No one should be forced to bury their children right in front of their eyes. No one should be forced to flee from one safe zone to another. No one should be forcibly starved and being used as a bargaining chip when they're human beings demanding just human rights and dignity. But what Palestinians also want to see from the world is while they are now, as I said, they're taking a break, they're probably catching a breath, they're trying to assess their lives after this genocide, they want the world not to forget about what happened to them. They want the world not to forget about their plight for freedom. And this is an important thing for us, especially people who live in the West, to remember. Whilst we have been fighting and resisting over the past 2 years, let's not forget that the sacrifices of Palestinians and the conditions they were forced to live under should put all of us to shame in terms of the comfort we live in. And we shouldn't lose sight for a moment that what's happening in Palestine is this is not going to stay in Palestine. If we are to connect this genocide to a lot of the other disasters that are happening across the globe, I mean, the environmental crisis for starters. The bombs that were dropped on Palestine, the impact of those bombs on the environment is going to be felt by all of us, all around the world. It's not going to stop in Palestine. So we need to remember our obligation now. And if we don't call for full accountability, we should seriously be asking ourselves then, how do we guarantee this is not going to happen to our loved ones elsewhere?
It's been a lot of hard work for a long time from people in the Palestine Solidarity movement, but I assume that it's not going to stop. What does it look like going forward, Palestinian Solidarity?
And now, even though the ceasefire has stopped, and by the way, it has not stopped, as in fully stopped. There are some bombs still dropping on Palestine, but they're less intense. But this is what Western media is not reporting on. Palestinians are still being killed as we speak, but they're not being killed in the same rate as during the genocide prior to the ceasefire agreement. But unfortunately, Western media is not reporting on this because Israel has broken that ceasefire agreement multiple times since it's been announced about a week ago. That said, Palestinians as well are still calling for those same conditions that allowed a genocide to happen with impunity to end. Because even if a ceasefire is in place, we're talking about the same conditions that have led for this genocide to happen in the first place. The illegal siege in Gaza is still in place. The illegal occupation, which the International Court of Justice called in July last year, that the Israeli presence in Palestine is unlawful, and called on every government around the world to do its obligation to end its support for this unlawful presence of Israeli companies, and this has not happened. Our government is still complicit in this illegal occupation, and the road to full liberation is long. But when we say the road to full liberation is long, what we mean is that we need to change the conditions, the circumstances on the ground that will lead to the full liberation of Palestinians. And I believe this is the time where we push even further. We need to talk about boycotts. We need to talk about sanctions. We need to talk about divestments, because all of these things are obligations. We are running some campaigns, such as the Caltex campaign. I don't know if the audience, maybe the audience are not aware, but Caltex is trading, or Chevron is trading as Caltex here in Australia. And Chevron is one of the main providers of fuel to the Israeli government while it was committing genocide. And we have a huge campaign here where we, on a monthly basis, we go stand them in front of Caltex servos. There's one in Dutton Park and one in the north side, and we've just targeted those two servos because they're central, and we stand there, we talk to people who are trying to get their fuel from Caltex, and raise awareness about their role in the genocide and in the illegal apartheid currently taking place in Palestine. We've also started a weapons campaign where we target those weapon manufacturing companies who that supported the genocide in Palestine and are still in contact and in direct, that they supply directly to Israel the weapons components that are used by Israeli occupation forces to oppress Palestinians. On Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, we are going to be in front of HTA, which is one of the companies that are used to provide weapons components to Israel, and they are involved in different ways in the current genocide and also the ongoing oppression of Palestinians. That's in Cooper's Plains this coming Tuesday, 9 o'clock. It's an open picket, and we want everyone to get involved in that picket. So there is a lot for us to do. If people want to get involved in these things, they can just open Justice for Palestine website or visit our social media channels where all the information is available. But this is just to say that the fact that a ceasefire exists now doesn't mean that we're going to stop fighting for the full liberation of Palestinians, because Palestinians deserve the full application of international law and human rights principles, and this has not happened. This peace plan is nothing but subjugating Palestinians and pacifying the movement, and Palestinians have fought for over 77 years. And this is not going to stop Palestinians from demanding the full application of international law, as I said, and we're going to demand nothing less than this.
All right. Thanks very much, Remah. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
I just want people to know that even though we witnessed a genocide, that doesn't mean we don't have hope. I mean, one of the things that really stuck with me was when the flotilla boats were approaching the shores of Gaza. Palestinians, despite the genocide, despite the bombs, despite the starvation, were waiting for them on the shore, and they were filled with hope. And if those Palestinians who are under relentless bombardment are still not losing hope, we should not lose hope at all. If anything, we should draw strength from each other.
Okay, thanks very much, Remah, for chatting with us today.
Thanks, Andy.
On the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ, we were speaking with Remah Naji. We've been talking about the ceasefire, which has taken place in Palestine, in Gaza, in the last week, and a very welcome ceasefire. But as Remah said, a lot of work still needed. And there have been a bunch of boats, a aquatic caravan to Gaza trying to take humanitarian aid, and it was called the Sumud Flotilla. Sumud is an Arabic word, and it means essentially steadfastness, resistance just by staying. And that flotilla is part of a long tradition of humanitarian flotillas to Gaza over the last couple of decades, and as ever, it was people from around the world, and one of them was Juliet Lamont, who is a great Australian activist who's been doing all kinds of things over the years, trying to make the world a better place. And so I spoke to Juliet about her experiences on the global Sumud Flotilla.
Yeah, my name is Juliet Lamont, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I recently came back from occupied Palestine, having been kidnapped against my will and put into prison by the Israeli occupation force.
Yeah, so you have recently been on the Sumud Flotilla to Gaza, and these flotillas to Gaza, they're not a new thing. They've been going for a while. Can you start by explaining to us, I guess, a bit about why the flotillas happen?
Well, I think for the last 20 years, different humanitarian groups, whether it be a bunch of doctors or, global citizens, have boarded boats to try and break the illegal naval blockade of Palestine to deliver really, really crucial aid like baby food and medicine and sustenance for people who are being starved. And, in 2010, there was 10 fatalities. The IOF reacted to some Turkish people on board that they were trying to intercept, and they killed 10 comrades. So even though they've never been effective, really, and also I suppose there's the added danger in the back of everyone's mind that the response from the IOF could be really escalated. But this one particularly, because it was so many boats, and it was people from about 46 countries, and that just seemed to hit this sweet spot, especially because the genocide has been going on so long, and governments are forced to own up to their complicity, especially in their sort of supply of weapons. There was something about this that really just sort of opened people's hearts and shone a light on what's happening in Gaza. So, I was really privileged and humbled to be part of something that actually felt maybe it's been a bit effective.
So can you tell us a bit about what it was like? You made your way to the Mediterranean. What kind of boat did you have? What kind of stuff were you carrying?
Yes, the idea was that there would be different waves, different components of the flotilla, and one left from Barcelona, and I was in Sicily in a port called Augusta, and so there was about, maybe 100 of us just working really, really hard, 15 hours a day trying to get all of these boats seaworthy. We were given one. Hilariously, I was the first mate, and my comrade Hamish Patterson from the MUA is another Australian, and our boat was called Wahoo, which is, all the other ones had beautiful sort of poetic Mediterranean names like Tajete or Mia Mia. But yeah, we had the Ocker boat called Wahoo, and it was a 50-foot Beneteau, which is quite a posh bourgeois sort of French-made boat, really. But we spray painted it with kind of anarchic, kind of more punk kind of slogans. We really kind of pimped it up that said Free Gaza and Break the Illegal Siege, and with about 11 others from all over the world. We had South Africa and Mexico and France, and we had a Dutch guy. We all got to know each other really well in the confines of Wahoo, and set sail. We were on that boat for about 3 weeks before we were intercepted and then kidnapped.
Were you an experienced seawoman before this?
Well, I think I kind of blagged my experience a lot more than I actually had, but there's nothing like being on a boat for 3 weeks, knowing that probably the most evil kind of force of humanity is about to intercept you, to really get your game on. So I actually learned how to sail pretty well. We all did, and And now, I'd be pretty confident. Now I'm getting a bit bolshy. I was like, I want to, I actually will organise the next flotilla, which in March. We want to make it bigger this time, and I'd like to skip on my own boat full of women. So that's my little dream.
Wow, good on you. Now, you did mention that there was a lot of international support and a lot of eyes on this flotilla. What did that feel like when you're on your way there?
Well, there was this amazing thing because Italy had just been so staunch. I mean, obviously they've got a far-right government, but the people of Italy, and particularly led by the Genoa dock workers, roused up so much support. They literally said, if any of our young men or women come back with a scratch on them, we are not going to let you, we're not exporting, we're not trading with you, Israel. So that turned into a shutdown of 75 cities, and it also turned into, suddenly, you'd look west and there's a huge naval ship from Italy, and then there was one from Spain, and then we had the Greek ones. So we were kind of flanked by what felt like like massive support. We weren't just, 500 activists. Now suddenly we were going there, in solidarity with, legitimate government support. So that felt amazing. It did feel like we were a force to be reckoned with.
Now, you said that you didn't really expect to reach the port at Gaza, and it turned out that you didn't. So what happened as you got closer to your destination?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's true. I think we did. I think the idealistic kind of hopeful humans that we are, we did think that we were, because we were getting really close as well. We got 20 nautical miles away from the shores of Gaza, so we could see it. As the sun was coming up, we could see the land, and some Palestinian doctors had been on the phone with us saying, you're almost here, and what would you like for lunch? And that was just that was heartbreaking, because these people had been starved, and this guy particularly had been working around the clock patching together, children's shattered limbs from sniper guns, and he was just so beautiful that he wanted to know what we wanted for lunch. So there was just a lot of love on those boats, and we did think that we would break the siege, but, we were confronted by, I don't know if there was over 100, but, we were confronted with the Navy, these huge boats with water cannons and sniper guns, and they did their best. They scuttled a few of our boats, and thankfully there was no fatalities, but it felt like there easily could have been. They used submarines, they drone bombed us with the precision that they were able to destroy our masts and destroy some of our vessels, but thankfully no one was injured. But yeah, it was the most frightening, terrifying experience of my life. And from when we were intercepted and cable tied and put below deck, and they took over the command of Wahoo, they are not mariners or seafarers in the least, and they drove it like they stole it. This boat that we'd come to love so much, we could hear them tearing the engine up, and they didn't even know how to dock the boat, so it was crunching into the side of the port. And things kind of went bad, from bad to worse, until we were finally released. I was sexually assaulted in the port, as well as numerous friends of mine. My friend Surya from the Northern Rivers has had his ribs broken and his shoulder dislocated. Greta Thunberg was forced to, hold the Israeli flag and was spat on and tortured and told that she's a whore. We were deprived medication, the water was undrinkable. All this stuff happened, and it was good to talk about it on return. But it's just like, imagine what's happening to Palestinians who don't have the light and the audience of 46 countries and don't have privileged white passports. So that's the thing that I keep going back to is, it pales in comparison to what the Palestinians go through on a daily basis. So for us to put our white privilege on the line and go through that and make our governments more accountable felt like the right thing to do, and kind of like the least we could do. Yeah.
When you were being detained, did you expect that things would turn out all right, that you'd be deported home, Australian government do something for you? What was going through your mind?
We had been told, because we did a lot of non-violent direct action training, and we'd gotten legal briefings that were using past flotillas as an example. And, we thought that we would have the choice to sign 3 documents, both of them in Hebrew, but the one in English would say that we had illegally come to Israel and that we would, once we signed the document, we would never be allowed to be back there in 100 years, which is classic. Not many of us signed that document. And that was under the proviso that we'd probably get, maybe would be, a couple of days, not in prison, but just, at an airport or in a detention centre. But that wasn't an option they took. So we were taken to Keziot prison in these really old-fashioned, archaic kind of human torture vans, which is absolutely no ventilation. I was in a tiny little lock-up with one other girl. I think there was probably maybe 10 compartments in the prison van. And that took about 4 hours. And as the sun was coming up, I could see, we were in the desert, I could see that, but I didn't know if we were going north or south. We'd know it. They wouldn't tell us where we were going. And through this tiny little kind of clink, I don't know where they'd serve, I don't know what it was, but I could see out of the van, and on the side of this really pretty dystopian looking building that was huge and old, it said, "The eternal state will never forget and will pursue its enemies until the end." So that's the slogan, this kind of Hunger Games slogan of these people that think that they are the chosen people of this land, and that it is completely justified that they kill the original people of Palestine. So that was frightening. And then we were processed, we were put into a cage, about 57 women were put in a cage, and Ben Gvir, one of the ministers of Israel, came with TV cameras and shone big lights on all of us and said that we were baby killers and we were terrorists and we were Jew haters. And some of us talked back to him, and then he said, "Shut the fuck up or I will gas you."
Wow.
I mean, that sort of set the tone of what was, 6.5 days of humiliation, assault, sleep deprivation. They'd bring in really regularly. They'd bring in these Alsatian dogs, which they must do the Palestinians, because we could hear them about 4 blocks down where we thought the kids might be. And they bring these these trained killer dogs in, and the men are in riot gear and with these submachine guns, or I'm not really good at weapons, but they're the guns that have the laser beams. So the laser beams would be trained on our heads when they'd come into the women's. I was in cell 11, which is a cell that's supposed to have 5 women in it, but we had 15. And it was just that. It was just that over and over again, them trying to break our spirits and break our humanity, and it didn't work. We just kept singing protest songs and trying to keep our spirits up and support our comrades who were on hunger strike. Probably about 60% of us didn't eat or drink anything the whole time we were there, in solidarity with Palestine. So it was it was like the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, times 10 on steroids. It was a really overwhelming but kind of amazing, like probably the most incredible thing I've ever experienced in my life.
I guess you didn't manage to get your medical supplies to Gaza, and you've been through a pretty horrific thing. Does it feel like you achieved what you set out for?
I think we've just shone a light on it, and I think we've normalised it. I mean, so many of us were white and, and come from countries that, like there's lots of, there's people from Switzerland. That's one of the, the richest countries in the world. And I think just because there was some kind of relationship and resonance with these young people prepared to put their bodies on the line and do something that was all about just breaking an illegal siege. Like, we were in international waters and we were kidnapped. There's nothing legal about what the Israelis did to us. You're allowed to take humanitarian aid to a country that's suffering genocide. You're allowed to do it. But, these people, or these serial killers, operate with complete impunity. And I think just that kind of poster girl relationship between, say, like a blonde Swedish girl or a young French man who's a politician, just made the world face up to the horrors of what Israel has been doing for almost 8 decades now. So I do think that it's worked. I do think that we're in a better position to force Albanese to sanction Israel. I think things are just coming to a bit of a... it's kind of crunch time, and we're organising another flotilla in March. It's going to be bigger. We've got new strategies because now we've worked, we've got a few things up our sleeve, which is really exciting. So I'm going to go back.
Well, good on you, Juliet. And I guess the struggle goes on in Palestine and around the world, hey?
Yeah, come on, everybody, hit the streets, block everything, sanction Israel. We can do it. Let's make the world a better place. Access your heart. We can do this, and we're very, 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 very strong when we do it together.
We just heard from somebody who was there on the boat, the Sumud Flotilla, Juliet Lamont. She gave us the full story of their experiences both on the water and then detained in prison in Israel there. And the latest in a long list of people, actions, creative, courageous actions, steadfast actions that people have taken to try to support the people there who have been locked up in that small, peninsula of Gaza, never allowed to leave, and then moved out of their homes, bombed over the last few years, and who now, though they are in peace, that place is in ruins and the whole place will be mourning and traumatized. And so we do need to remember the people of Gaza and keep showing what support we can. And so, keep an eye on that. And I think there'll be potentially, now that humanitarian aid actually is allowed into Gaza, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities for us around the world to show our support financially to help rebuild that place if this ceasefire holds and if they are allowed to return to their homes and start rebuilding. That'll certainly be something that the rest of the world, will be incumbent on us, having watched this happen. And as Remah said earlier in the show, there are a few events coming up that you will be able to get along to. So do keep an eye out, but I'm out of time. And that's it. There's a better world, better media for us if we get out and do it, and a better world if we can get out and make it. And so I'll see you out there.